Hello everyone, we are ready for chapter 42 of the Treasure Hunter's Tale. Hope, who was now 12, had made a request to be baptised as she had been walking on the King's Road for a few years now, much to the delight of her parents, and she was showing real evidence of truly loving the King and his ways. She was bullied at school for her faith quite a lot, but she just tried to take it as a sign that her love for her King was showing through clearly to her peers, and so bore it with fortitude. Mrs. Beloved of the King had once more written to all their friends to invite them to come and celebrate Hope's baptism, and so it happened that gradually all the characters we have met on this journey were once again being gathered to one spot together, which is how the officer who oversees and knows the future had planned it. Hope had made one or two good friends in her class, but even they struggled when Hope was picked on, for they did not yet understand her faith. Hope prayed very much that they would come to understand it and claim it for their own too, and so she had invited her whole class to witness her baptism. But it was a month away yet, and so Hope spent her time visiting the sick with her mother and Ian, as she had a real heart already for those less fortunate than herself. Ian especially loved visiting with his mother and sister, as the old ladies and gentlemen that they went to see would often give him biscuits and toffees and then tell him wonderful stories. But he too was gently learning at his mother's knee the importance of the good news of the King, and would practice telling Bible stories to his friends, as his elder brother had done before him when he first came back from the pirate ship. Ian admired Freddie and his mother greatly for their time on the pirate ship, although he thought it more of an adventure than a trial. One evening he was sitting with his father, breaking some twigs to make them small enough to go into his mother's bread oven, when he brushed the sticks off his lap and looked up at Mr. Newhart. "So, Daddy," he said, quite out of the blue, "how did you come to love the King?" Mr. Newhart smiled. "Well, my boy, that is a long story." "But a good one, I'll wager," said little Ian, mimicking the way his father often spoke. "Aye, that it is," chuckled Mr. Newhart, "but not because of me, but because of the King." "Well, do tell it to me, please," said Ian, "for I know Mummy's heart story, and Freddie's, and Hope's, but I don't know yours," he said, smiling up at his father. "Well now," said Mr. Newhart, delighted that his son wanted to know, "my old name was Stoneheart." Ian made a face. "That's not a happy name," he said. "No, it's not," agreed Mr. Newhart. "But I wasn't a happy child," he said. "My parents were not very kind to me and made me feel like I didn't deserve to be loved," he said sadly. "Oh, that's horrid," cried Ian, jumping up. "Not like you and Mummy," he said firmly. "You and Mummy love us so much," he said. "Yes, we do, Ian," said his father, pulling him onto his lap. "Yes, we do." Anyway, as I grew up, I continued to feel unloved and not wanted, and this made my heart very hard, because when you are constantly treated like nothing, you form a very thick skin and believe that pain and neglect are just part of your lot. "That's horrid and sad," said Ian, patting his father's cheek. "Let's skip to the happy part," he said. "Yes, let's," said his father. "It wasn't until I was about Freddie's age that I was treated kindly by an old pastor and his wife. They sort of took me into their family," he said. "They showed me what kindness and care and love really was, and they did this by the way they treated me and talked to me, and gradually my heart softened towards them." "And the King?" asked Ian. "Yes, and the King," said Mr. Newhart. "It took many years, for my heart was very hurt, but gradually the officer showed me when I read the King's book that I could also experience his love, not because I deserved it, but because he wanted to give it to me." "Hooray!" cried Ian. "Yes, hooray! And praise the King for his goodness," cried his father. "I do," said Ian, "and I want a soft heart, like you and Mummy and Freddie and Hope, and Auntie my weakness is his strength, and Uncle saved by grace, and everyone else." "Well, Ian," said his father lovingly, "you can have one. Just ask God to forgive you for your sins and trust that Jesus dying on the cross was for the punishment of your sins, and then the King will give you that heart of flesh that he gave me. And Mummy. Yes, and Freddie and everyone else you see who is wearing the King's armour." Ian was very quiet and thoughtful for a while, and Mr. Newhart wisely didn't disturb his thinking time. Ian got up. "Okay," he said, "I'm off to bed now. Good night, Daddy." And he kissed his father and scurried off upstairs. Mr. Newhart prayed for his boy that the conversation they had just had would penetrate his little heart, and then he prayed a prayer of thanksgiving for how the King had helped him through the years, for it had been a long time since he had had to talk about his abusive childhood, and it made him think of how much he had been helped, and it made him think of Freddie's childhood too, as the cabin boy on board the pirate ship. "You have certainly guided my family through many trials and triumphs," he said in his prayer. "Thank you, my King, for all your love and care and protection of my family. Thank you for bringing us to you and bringing us together in the different ways you have." He sat back thinking of his past, how the king had led him to meet Mr. Discover the Truth and Mr. Saved by Grace, the adventures they had had together, how he had met his wife, and how she had met her mother, how Mrs. Beloved of the King had met Freddie, and how Ian had joined the family, and now he was getting ready to baptize Hope. You have been very good to me, he praised and worshipped, and will continue to care for us, I know it. Meanwhile, Ian was praying. He was giving his little heart and life to the king and thanking him for his goodness and love too. The next day the officer called for Ian to take him to the hill, and Mr. Newhart asked if he could go with them to be there for Ian, but also to recommit himself to the king and his way. And so the merry band went off. Hope and Mrs. Beloved of the King stayed at home to bake biscuits ready for their visits to the old and sick folk of the town, but they did it with even more joy than usual as they praised God for Ian's new heart. Ian's time at the hill was precious, and he too was given his very own armour, which of course was made specially for him. He was given his new name too, which was Pray Without Ceasing. But we shall continue to call him Ian for now, as it has a precious meaning too, and reminds us of his dear mother's conversion before she died. Ian skipped along by his father's side on their way back home. He was so excited to see the old people who he normally visited with his mother and Hope and tell them of his new heart and new name. And as they made their journey back, he put his new name into practice and started praying for all those dear people, both the elderly and the sick, who had been so kind to him over the years. And now he wanted to show God's kindness to them. Now he truly belonged to the king.